much of Southeast Asia was going through its socioeconomic development. So has kept their young people busy and avoided this, but many of the Southeast Asian countries are today going through political reorganization, political instability, because about 25 or 30 years ago they went through a bunch of development. If you look at the countries that went through socio-political, demographic transitions in the 70s and the 80s, those are all the regions that have all the political chaos happening now, Southeast Asia and the Middle East. It's kind of a formula. When this starts to happen, you've got about 25, 30, maybe 40 years to go before you get a new sort of political system. Because demographic transition leads to youth bulges, and youth bulges equal political instability. More ideological, less tied down, more likely to be disgruntled because they're overpopulated. Okay, number 28 had a typo, which doesn't really change anything. Did anybody notice what Time magazine says is the best way to lower population growth? Give control to women. The funny thing is, the article did not say the easiest way to control population growth. The Time magazine article actually said what that's got to do with climate change. And so I messed up the question. It should have said, what did Time magazine suggest is the best way to lower climate change? And whatever, when you're thinking population growth, remember you're thinking climate growth or change growth. Acceleration of climate change. Yeah, the change of the change, or whatever. Change changing. Apparently the cheapest way to lower carbon in the future is to spread condoms around now. Rather than focus on alternative energy, rather than focus on more efficient cars, we should just make sure that nobody has a baby they didn't want to have. Whatever kind of birth control is required for that. Because our biggest problem 20 years from now is not just the climate that we're causing now, but the fact that the climate change will grow even faster because there will be even more of us 20 years from now. I know, but you can't block the hand of God, as everyone knows. Yes, I call that the hand of God. Okay. Number 29. Very interesting part of this conversation was added by someone recently on the Facebook group. Was that you? Check this out. This is the world distorted by AIDS, and you'll notice that the continents do not look to be their normal size, because their size actually reflects the percentage of their population that has AIDS. So the United States looks pretty tiny. Brazil is definitely dominating South America. The Dominican Republic has exploded, and of course, Africa in this is bigger than the rest of the planet. These show your percentages of AIDS infection. And so, of course, as all of you know by now, Africa is the most AIDS-infected continent. The southern part of Africa has the highest rates of AIDS transmission. 1 in 5 Botswanans has AIDS. And when you consider that the number is less for their babies and for their elderly, that means people of reproductive age, much more than 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 3 have AIDS.
That's like twice as bad as playing Russian roulette.
Yes, it is. And actually, since 2 people are playing at the same time, right, they both face the same odds. It might be twice as bad as playing Russian roulette.
So you're going to die.
Because you're playing Russian roulette where the bullet goes 2 ways, I guess. So. Anyway.
It's just a grenade at that point.
I guess it is, right? Yeah, nobody walks out alive. That was a very interesting issue. I thought about AIDS that I just learned. I had heard this problem about Africa, but I'm not sure many of you actually saw this article? Do you want to tell us what the funny thing or the amazing thing of that article was?
Yeah, the number is no more than 35% of HIV in that population is spread through sex, that population being Africa.
Yeah, and I believe it might have been specific to Southern Africa, but maybe not. You can see that.
I can't click on the link here.
Right, no, you can't. Less than 35% of all new AIDS cases are caused by unprotected sex or sexual transmission of some sort.
Does that include birth?
No. So the remaining 65%, anybody want to take a stab at this? Have a guess?
Needles?
He's the closest.
Needles among other things.
Yeah, needles among other things.
Unsanitary health.
That's right. Lack of sterilization. You see, if you're going to develop a country that's coming out of crippling poverty, imagine you want to go to Botswana. Imagine you want to go to Botswana and help them develop. You want to throw some money at Botswana. A little bit of food aid, a little bit of water. And then one of the very first priorities is always medicine. We got to get some medical infrastructure. Let's bring in some doctors. Let's build a few clinics. Build some operating rooms and get to work. The funny thing about hospitals, sterilization is actually a pretty fancy step up in the hospital world. You can have a hospital with no beds. The next problem, get some beds. The next problem, get some lights. The next problem, get some plumbing. The next problem, and you just go down the list. Getting an autoclave, getting a bleach sterilization protocol for the cleaning crew, getting a reliable supply of disposable surgical tools and disposable needles. That's way down the list. So a lot of countries in Africa are working on the medical clinic, the lights, the beds, the doctors, the educational system. They're not quite yet at the point of development where they have good sterilization protocol and they can clean all their surgical instruments. So the majority of AIDS transmission in Africa today is not sexual. As a matter of fact, it's roughly 2 to 1 unsanitary medical procedures to sexual transmission. Everybody has known for a long time about the unsanitary medicine, but the scale, that's a new assessment of those numbers. And the entire international community is pretty surprised by this, as far as I could tell. I chased down the authors of that thing, and I found the actual study, and apparently they were saying that the big problem now is nobody knows how to fix this. By now, if you say this country has a rising rate of sexual transmission, we know where to order the condoms, we know how to translate the paperwork, we know which is the most successful strategy for targeting young women. We don't know the most successful strategy to make medical services in the third world more sanitary. We know how to do that in the U.S. Sanitation here is easy, but you can't just take all the American sanitation protocol to the third world. Medicine is remote. Medicine is practiced by a number of other people with different degrees of qualifications, with different degrees of transportation, less reliable electricity, less people to fix the autoclave when it breaks.
Much harder problem. They use needles that are used on people with AIDS to check people without AIDS for AIDS and then give them AIDS.
I guess that is a slightly dramatic version of the problem, yeah. In the U.S., we know that it's cheaper to give a drug addict free needles than it is to talk them out of using drugs. 1,000 to 1. I can keep 1,000 intravenous drug users from sharing their AIDS. what's my UPC number? Okay, thanks. And I make my barcode and I get it. Daniel, put that on the shelf. You can sell it at your store. On the other hand, if I'm an international coffee cup maker, my name is Contigo, and I take my coffee mug over to Europe, I'm like, hey, can I get a barcode? They say, sure. Just show us your proof of registration of all the chemicals used in your coffee mug, and then please make sure that your registration includes the proof for each of those chemicals that they're known to be safe. And I'm like, never mind. I'm not going to sell my crap to Europe. Or I have to go to the lab and go, hey guys, what did you put in this? Is there research on all those chemicals? What? The blue's bad? Okay. Hey guys, can we make them orange? Okay, here we go. Europe will sell me the thing when I can prove that all the chemicals have been registered and proven to be safe. Back to the United States. I just sold a whole bunch of blue stuff. What happens to me in the United States? Yeah, I just got rich. As a public expense. Maybe, maybe not. Hopefully not. It's not good business. So in a free market, I would be punished because my reputation goes down because I just killed a whole bunch of you with a preventable toxin.
Might take a while, though.
Might take a while. And what if we don't find out about how bad it was? What if it's cheaper to settle the lawsuits than it is to change the color of my coffee mug?
Also, people dying of cancer, they're probably not going to think that coffee mug is getting too.
Also, it's really hard to prove that things have caused harm. And so, if you live in Europe, everything that you buy has been proven to be safe. If it's not, you couldn't buy it. Welcome to America. We're really good for business.
I thought that this was a physical ego one.
Yeah, that's true. There's no way to test that. Okay. Number 31 is a big deal, but it's just a list, so you can keep the list or skip the list. I need to talk about Inuit country. If any of you have seen the Facebook page for our group in the last couple of hours, you may have noticed an interesting submission. Have you guys heard of the Inuit? You may have heard of them as Eskimos before political correctness. The name that is used for their tribe by their tribe is Inuit. Apparently, Eskimo is an insult.
How did that even come about?
Because we used to call them by their insulting name. Do you guys know what squaw is?
Yeah.
Like when you...
That's like the version. We've been calling them Eskimo this whole time. It's the equivalent of squaw.
I don't think it's quite as crude as squaw. Squaw is a very unkind word for female genitalia. So that was used by some Native Americans. They were like, oh, that's what we call it, right? We call yes, females are known as female genitalia. So many Americans for a long time referred to American Indian women as squaws, which of course is not very nice at all. Eskimo, like that word, was an inappropriate word not to be used for talking about a tribe when you speak of them with respect. So weird. We don't use Eskimo anymore. They're called Inuit.
You know the semantics behind Eskimo?
No. I'd love to find out. I bet you can smartphone it. Check this out. They live in one of the cleanest parts of the world. They have no industrial pollution. There's no smog. There's no runoff. No agricultural pesticides. They tend to use no cosmetics. They tend to eat no processed foods. They have very few or no pharmaceuticals. They have what you might consider some of the most natural bodies on Earth. In the sense that there are very, very, very few chemicals in their day-to-day life. They eat a really simple, uniform diet